Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu and with me is Aditi Lumba bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi attends state funeral of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo. Pays final tribute to visionary leader. India and US must jointly counter radicalization, extremism and fundamentalism, asserts Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. Holds talks with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington, D.C. India conducts successful tests of Very Short-Range Air Defense System missile. Philippines to shut 175 offshore gambling firms and deport 40,000 Chinese workers in a major crackdown on online gaming businesses. WTO chief warns world edging into global recession. Mysterious gas leaks hit Nord Stream pipelines linking Russia and Europe. Hurricane Ian lashes Cuba as Florida braces for major disaster. And in cricket, India to take on South Africa in opening T20 International of 3-match series tomorrow. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended the state funeral of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo on Tuesday. Mr. Modi paid the floral tribute to late Shinzo Abe at the Nippon Budokan. After participating in the state funeral, the Prime Minister met with the spouse of Shinzo Abe, Mrs. Aki Abe, at Akasaka Palace. The Prime Minister of India recalled his fond memories with Shinzo Abe and conveyed his heartfelt condolences on this tragic loss. Remembering Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister Modi said he was a great leader, a phenomenal individual who always believed in India-Japan friendship. Indian Prime Minister also held a bilateral meeting with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida. Mr. Modi conveyed his deepest condolences for the demise of Shinzo Abe. The Indian Prime Minister noted the contributions of Shinzo Abe in strengthening India-Japan partnership as well in conceptualizing the vision of a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. During their talks on Tuesday, Mr. Modi and Mr. Kishida held a productive exchange of views on further deepening bilateral relations. They also discussed a number of regional and global issues. The leaders expressed their commitment for strengthening the India-Japan special strategic and global partnership. The Prime Minister of India also held productive talks with Prime Minister of Australia Anthony Albanese in Tokyo. He said India and Australia will keep working closely to boost the India-Australia friendship in diverse sectors. Prime Minister Modi has since left for New Delhi after concluding his Japan visit. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on India-Japan relations and role of Shinzo Abe. In conversation are former ambassador to Japan, Deepa Gopalan Vadva, and journalist Nilova Roy Chaudhary.
Narendra Modi ji visited Japan today to attend the state funeral ceremony for the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Prime Minister's visit was a personal opportunity for Modi ji to honor the memory of former Prime Minister Abe, whom he considered a dear friend and a great champion of the India-Japan relationship. During the brief visit, the Prime Minister also met with the current Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Mrs. Abe and conveyed his personal condolences as well as those on behalf of India. Prime Minister Abe was assassinated while on an election campaign tour on July the 8th in the northern Japanese city of Nara. India had declared a day of state mourning for him on July the 9th. Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Vadva joins us this evening to explain what was so special about Mr. Abe that Mr. Modi felt he had to personally go to convey his condolences. Good evening, Deepa.
Good evening, Nilova. Lovely to be on the show.
Why was Prime Minister Abe so special for India? What was it about his tenure as Prime Minister that made it so memorable for the India-Japan relationship?
Well, I think Prime Minister Modi, today when he met Prime Minister Kishida, he spoke about the very special role that Prime Minister Abe played in strengthening and deepening the India-Japan relationship. He was Prime Minister for 2 terms. One was a very brief term, 2006 to 2007. It was during that term that he came to India. He addressed both houses of parliament, and he gave that famous speech on the confluence of the seas, which in a way launched the concept of the Indo-Pacific, which very much involved India in the dynamism of the entire Asian region, including ASEAN and all the way up to Japan and East Asia. So he came back in 2012, and I think it was during that period, he was 4 terms in office. He visited India 3 times. Our prime ministers, as you know, have annual summits. At each meeting, there was something very consequential announcements made at these visits. For example, it was during Prime Minister Modi's visit in 2014 that they talked about making our relationship into a special strategic and global partnership. In 2014 January, he was the first ever Japanese Prime Minister to be invited as chief guest to our Republic Day parade. It was during his time that the Empress of Japan visited India for the first time. And actually, if you look at any aspect of the relationship, be it political, economic, security, defense, you find a very, very marked deepening of the relationship during his time. We also find that, he was a great ideator. And in giving the world the concept of the free and open Indo-Pacific, he included India and gave it a very important role. And in operationalizing this vision, he talked about the quadrilateral security dialogue, in which India was a very important pillar. And thereby he drew India in to what his vision was for the region, as well as what his vision was for the world.
So, Mr. Abe and Prime Minister Modi also developed this very close personal bond. They used to follow each other on Twitter as well, possibly even before Prime Minister Modi became the Prime Minister. So it was also this very special bond that took Prime Minister Abe to Ahmedabad during his tenure in office around 2014 or 2015 or thereabouts. And so that particular bond also, I think, really helped the bilateral relationship to flourish enormously. Would that be a correct assessment?
Well, let me tell you that the change in the Indo-Japan relationship started in about 2000. When Japan, I think we looked at the role of India, it was our growing economic, heft and our own growing, I think, military power, and, recognized that we were a very important part of Asia. So the change in the relationship really started in 2000. And, various prime ministers and governments on both sides. On the Japanese side, we first had the LDP government. It was Prime Minister Modi, followed by Prime Minister Koizumi, Prime Minister Abe. And on our side, of course, then we had the NDA. It was Prime Minister Vajpayee, later Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and then Prime Minister Modi. My point of saying is that this is a relationship which has grown irrespective of who the governments were and who the leaders were. Because this is a relationship that is extremely important to both countries. But having said that, without a doubt, Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe went beyond the normal relationship between two leaders. They had a very special personal bond. I mean, this was so very evident in their interactions. I mean, Prime Minister Abe being taken not only to Gujarat, being also taken to Varanasi. Prime Minister Abe, when he came to India, Prime Minister Abe takes Prime Minister Modi to his personal residence. And the entire relationship, one saw that there was a very, very special personal bonding that went beyond the bilateral relationship that we had. And I think this has come out in, Prime Minister Modi's very, very obvious, deep sorrow at the loss of his friend, which he expressed today. His declaration of a day of mourning at that point of time, state mourning in India. And the fact that he's taken this just not even for 24 hours, for less than 24 hours, to be there at the state funeral of his friend.
Prime Minister Abe was very largely responsible for really pushing the concept of Quad, as you said, the quadrilateral of 4 democracies. Now, very high representatives, of course, the Prime Minister has gone from here. I believe the Australian Prime Minister is also in Tokyo for the funeral, and the US Vice President Kamala Harris, I think, was the representative from the United States. Now, the Quad as a concept has arrived, as it were, today after sort of an initial hitch. And that very largely is perhaps Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's most lasting contribution to global peace, as it were. Would that be a right assessment again?
Well, the concept, first of all, of the free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific. What Prime Minister Abe did was that there was the Indian Ocean and there was the Pacific Ocean. Till that point of time, you talked about the Asia Pacific. The Asia Pacific was centered around East Asia and the ASEAN. It did not include India. By talking of the confluence of the two seas, by making India and Japan, as it were, the bookends of this concept of the free and open Indo-Pacific, what Prime Minister Abe did was in way include us in this very, very dynamic economic region that the Indo-Pacific, that Asia has become. But then this was a vision, and this was also a vision of a rule-based international order, that there would be democracies, and they would work for peace and prosperity of the region, but based on certain principles. And obviously what the concern was the growing assertiveness of China, which really broke no rules that were existing rules that were there. So it was directed, in a way, it was because of the rise of China, but not even so. I think it was just about peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and the fact that we had to work together. Now, that was a vision that he had. Now, how did you operationalize that vision? And that operationalizing of the vision was the Quad, as started off as a quadrilateral strategic initiative dialogue among these four democracies, the large four democracies of the Indo-Pacific, which was Japan itself, India, Australia, and the US. And initially, yes, you're quite right. I mean, there was hesitation, particularly the Australians actually backed out because I think there was a change of government and pressure of the Chinese and so on. But when Prime Minister Abe came back again in 2012, and I think the world got much more conscious of the, really deteriorating security environment in that region due to, I think, the advent of a very, very assertive China because of North Korea and various other threats to the region, that this thing was revived. This concept of the quadrilateral, the Quad was revived. Now we have working groups which have been formed, and we have actually identified 7 or 8 issues on which these four countries will work together, but not only for them by themselves, but bringing in the other countries of the region. And the other important thing is of this concept of the free and open Indo-Pacific is that started by Prime Minister Abe, but everybody's now, all the countries in the region, they see the importance of this entire concept and the principles behind it. And so you have ASEAN today with its own Indo-Pacific policy, and also other actors from Europe who feel that this is an area of great importance to them, where they have a stake, and therefore you have different countries of the region now stating their own Indo-Pacific policy. So for all of this, who do we have to thank but Prime Minister Abe?
Well, it's one of those sort of tragedies that happen, I guess. It's really quite sad because he genuinely was an absolute well-wisher who wanted very good things to happen to India. But we've run right out of time. Deepa, thank you so very much for all of those insights and inputs that you gave us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilova.
External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, on Tuesday said, India and US must jointly counter radicalization, extremism and fundamentalism. He said the United States was very much open to engaging with India today than ever before, and he was bullish about the relationship between the two countries. The Indian External Affairs Minister was speaking at a joint press briefing after holding bilateral talks with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington, D.C.
A large part of our deliberations today were devoted to the strengthening of our bilateral relationship. In today's meeting, we discussed our political coordination, working together in plurilateral and multilateral formats, and exchanging assessments on collaborating on important regional issues and global challenges. I would specifically mention the Ukraine conflict and the Indo-Pacific situation in that regard. I shared with Secretary Blinken my experience of interactions during the UN General Assembly about the deep anxieties in the global south on fuel, on food, on fertilizers.
Dr. S. Jaishankar expressed appreciation over the strong cooperation India received from the US on tackling international terrorism, in particular the listing of well-known and wanted terrorists by US sanctioned process, the Indian External Affairs Minister said India and the United States have a strong interest in encouraging more resilient and strong supply chains. He said this requires policy decisions as well as practical measures involving business communities. On Russia-Ukraine conflict, Dr. S. Jaishankar said this conflict is not in anybody's interest. He said the best way forward is to return the dialogue and diplomacy. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the two leaders talked about ways to further strengthen the strategic partnership between the two countries and advance shared objectives. He said partnership between India and US is one of the most consequential in the world. During the briefing, Mr. Blinken reiterated Prime Minister Narendra Modi's remarks to Russian President Vladimir Putin during SCO summit in Uzbekistan that this is not an era and the time for war, and United States could not agree more with Mr. Modi. Union Agriculture and Farmers Welfare Minister Narendra Singh Tomar today arrived in Bali, Indonesia on a 3-day visit to participate in G20 summit. Mr. Tomar held separate bilateral meetings with the Canadian Minister of Agriculture, Mary Claude Barbio, and Australia Assistant Minister for Trade and Manufacturing, Tim Aris. In his bilateral meetings, Mr. Tomar extended invitation to both the ministers for the G20 Agri-Summit to be hosted by India next year. Besides, he also sought their support for the International Year of Millet 2023 to be celebrated under India's stewardship.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
India's Defence Research and Development Organisation DRDO on Tuesday conducted 2 successful test flights of Very Short-Range Air Defence System missile. The test flights were conducted at the Integrated Test Range at Chandipur in Odisha. India's Ministry of Defence said Very Short-Range Air Defence System is a man-portable air defence system designed and developed by DRDO in collaboration with Indian industry partners. The missile is designed to neutralize low-altitude aerial threats at short ranges. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has called upon the Indian defence industry to identify and manufacture state-of-the-art, cost-effective products and technologies to realize the vision of a new India. He said this will not only cater to its needs of the country, but also fulfill international requirements. Mr. Singh was addressing the 5th annual session of Society of Indian Defence Manufacturers in New Delhi on Tuesday.
Indian Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh has said that India will support BRICS efforts in developing innovative and inclusive solutions to promote sustainable development. Addressing the 10th BRICS Meet of Science and Technology Ministers through virtual mode on Tuesday, he called for joint fight against common challenges. Dr. Singh underlined the importance of science and technology and innovation in bringing together the researchers to tackle new and emerging challenges. Bhutan and Nepal have expressed gratitude to India for supplying COVID-19 vaccines under Vaccine Maitri initiative. In his address at the high-level 77th session of the UN General Assembly, Foreign Minister of Bhutan, Lyompo Tandidorji, said that more than 90% of his country's population is fully vaccinated. He said this was possible due to the heartwarming goodwill of friends and partners, including India.
In a major crackdown on unlicensed online gaming businesses, the Philippines government on Tuesday announced that it will shut more than 175 gambling dens and deport about 40,000 Chinese workers. Justice Ministry spokesperson said the crackdown was triggered by reports of murder, kidnapping and other crimes committed by Chinese nationals against fellow Chinese nationals. First partial voting results from 4 Russian-controlled regions of Ukraine showed overwhelming majorities in favor of becoming part of Russia. Russian state news agency RIA said on Tuesday that results showed over 96% in Russian-controlled regions of Ukraine, namely Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson, favored joining Russia.
European countries are investigating 3 mystery leaks in 2 major gas pipelines between Russia and Europe. The cause of the damage to Nord Stream 1 and 2 is unclear, but authorities have not ruled out sabotage. The operator of Nord Stream 1 said the undersea lines had simultaneously sustained unprecedented damage in one day. Both pipelines have been flashpoints in the energy tussle between Moscow and Europe. According to media reports, though the cause of damage is still unknown, it will not immediately affect the supply of gas to Europe as neither pipeline was operational. The European Union had previously accused Russia of using a reduction in gas supplies to blackmail Europe, but Moscow denies this. German, Danish and Swedish authorities are all investigating the incidents. The World Trade Organization's chief said on Tuesday she believes the world is heading towards a global recession due to multiple colliding crises and called for policies to revive growth. Speaking at the opening of the Global Trade Body's annual public forum in Geneva, WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala said, "The Russia-Ukraine conflict, the climate crisis, food prices and energy shocks and the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic were creating the conditions for a world recession."
Over the past 75 years since independence, India's largest public service broadcaster, All India Radio, has been the proverbial storyteller for crores of people across the country. All India Radio is celebrating 75 years of freedom with the series Azad Bharat Ki Baat Akashvani ke Saath. It showcases the journey of India since independence in various walks of life through the storytelling of All India Radio. In today's episode, we will bring you the story of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, which aims to promote Indian goods in the global supply chain markets and help the country achieve self-reliance.
Today we are taking a look at how India emerged as Atmanirbhar or self-reliant in the midst of the COVID pandemic. Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan is the vision of New India envisaged by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It aims to make India a bigger and more important part of the global economy, pursuing policies that are efficient, competitive and resilient, and being self-sustaining and self-generating. On 12th May 2020, Prime Minister Modi announced a 20 lakh crore special comprehensive economic package to fight the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. Giving a clarion call for Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, the Prime Minister also outlined 5 pillars of Atmanirbhar Bharat: economy, infrastructure, system, vibrant demography and demand.
भारत की संकल्प शक्ति ऐसी है कि भारत आत्मनिर्भर बन सकता है। साथियों, आत्मनिर्भर भारत की ये भव्य इमारत 5 पिलर्स पर खड़ी हो। पहला पिलर इकोनॉमी, एक ऐसी इकोनॉमी जो इंक्रीमेंटल चेंज नहीं बल्कि क्वांटम जंप लाए। दूसरा पिलर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, एक ऐसा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जो आधुनिक भारत की पहचान बने। तीसरा पिलर हमारी सिस्टम, एक ऐसा सिस्टम जो बीती शताब्दी की रीति नीति नहीं बल्कि 21वीं सदी के सपनों को साकार करने वाली टेक्नोलॉजी ड्रिवन व्यवस्थाओं पर आधारित हो। चौथा पिलर हमारी डेमोग्राफी, दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी डेमोक्रेसी में हमारी वाइब्रेंट डेमोग्राफी हमारी ताकत है। आत्मनिर्भर भारत के लिए हमारी ऊर्जा का स्रोत है। पांचवा पिलर डिमांड, हमारी अर्थव्यवस्था में डिमांड और सप्लाई चेन का जो चक्र है, जो ताकत है, उसे पूरी क्षमता से इस्तेमाल किए जाने की जरूरत है।
The Atmanirbhar Bharat Package 2.0 was announced on the 12th of October 2020 and Atmanirbhar Bharat Package 3.0 on the 12th of November 2020. Several measures were undertaken by the government under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan in different sectors, which include reforms for MSME, agriculture, fisheries and food processing sectors. This campaign also focused on reforms for the poor, farmers and migrant workers. India's spirit of self-reliance is evident from the fact that from zero production of personal protection equipment kits before March 2020, the country developed the capacity to produce over 5 lakh PPE kits daily. From just 1 lab at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, the nation now has over 3,300 testing labs in the country. In diagnostics, India swiftly became self-sufficient and it emerged as the world's cheapest provider of RT-PCR tests. The government worked round the clock to boost production and supply of essentials such as N95 masks, medicines and made-in-India ventilators. The country also achieved self-reliance in vaccine manufacturing, which helped it to undertake world's largest vaccination drive smoothly. Progress started with the collective efforts of India's researchers and scientists in streamlining the country's response toward an evidence-based approach to successfully tackle the pandemic. India's achievement in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic was acknowledged by global leaders who praised it for its Vaccine Maitri initiative, which provided over 2,544 lakh vaccine doses to over 100 countries around the world. The central government over the years has made its flagship Make in India and Atmanirbhar campaigns the focal points of various industrial policies with an aim to lower dependence on imports and to boost local production of high-value goods.
World Tourism Day was observed on Tuesday. This day is celebrated every year to foster awareness among the international community on the importance of tourism and its social, cultural, political and economic value. The theme for this year is Rethinking Tourism and will be highlighting the tourism sector being recognized as an important pillar for development. Vice President of India, Jagdeep Dhankar, described India as heaven for tourism and asked the Indians to explore domestic tourist destinations first before looking at international travel. Mr. Dhankar was addressing a gathering after presenting National Tourism Awards for the year 2018 and 19 in New Delhi on Tuesday. Hurricane Ian has made landfall in western Cuba as a Category 3 storm, bringing wind speeds of up to 205 kilometers per hour. Cuban authorities declared emergencies in 6 areas, with forecasters warning of storm surges on the coast along with flash floods and mudslides. Tens of thousands of people were asked to leave their homes and seek shelter. Hurricane Ian is expected to strengthen en route to Florida, where the governor has warned of a potential major disaster. Some 38,000 people were evacuated in the province of Pinar del Rio in Cuba. In the United States, hurricane conditions are expected along the west coast of Florida on Wednesday morning, with tropical storm conditions possibly beginning late on Tuesday. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency for all of Florida over the weekend and has activated 5,000 National Guard troops to assist with relief efforts.
In cricket, India will take on South Africa in opening T20 international of 3-match series at Greenfield International Stadium in Thiruvananthapuram tomorrow. Guwahati's Barsapara Cricket Stadium will host the second match of the series, scheduled to be played on the 2nd of October. After the completion of the T20 international series, the two teams will take part in the 3-match ODI series slated to be played from the 6th of October. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The New York Times writes that Typhoon Noru heads for Vietnam after hitting the Philippines. Wall Street Journal reports that Shinzo Abe's state funeral draws world leaders' protesters. Washington Post reports that the British pound just plummeted, what it means for the UK tourists. The Guardian writes that China growth lags Asia Pacific for the first time in decades as World Bank cuts outlook. South China Morning Post says US agency mounted thousands of cyber attacks on Chinese university. And now a quick look at the headlines once again. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi attends state funeral of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo, pays final tribute to visionary leader. India and US must jointly counter radicalization, extremism and fundamentalism, asserts Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, holds talks with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington, D.C. India conducts successful tests of Very Short-Range Air Defense System missiles. Philippines to shut 175 offshore gambling firms and deport 40,000 Chinese workers in major crackdown on online gaming businesses. WTO chief warns world edging into global recession. Mysterious gas leaks hit Nord Stream pipelines linking Russia and Europe. Hurricane Ian lashes Cuba as Florida braces for major disaster. And in cricket, India to take on South Africa in the opening T20 international of 3-match series tomorrow. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Uganda. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.